Hola! Today we're going to be taking notes about el presente del subjuntivo. And you'll note that you have a very lengthy notes packet. You're not taking all of the notes today. You're going to be focusing on la primera parte, which is ¿qué es? What is it? And ¿cómo lo formamos? How do we form it? Now, some of you, depending on which teacher you had last year, may have seen this before in some detail. Some of you also may not have seen it at all, depending on who your teacher was. So this is going to be introduced more or less as if it's a new topic for all of you. And if you happen to be familiar with it from last year, take it as a refresher and a practice and make sure that you get good information either way so that we can move forward, okay? This is going to be really your main grammar point, the subjunctive, for the rest of the academic year. We'll be expanding on what you learned today and what you learn next week. Throughout the next few weeks and into second semester. So let's roll. The first thing you need to know is ¿qué es el subjuntivo? And hay tres modos de verbos. That means that there are three different moods of verbs that we use. And you've actually been using a couple of them already without even being aware of it, unless a prior teacher has mentioned this to you, okay? The first mood is el indicativo, or the indicative, which is what you've been using really since you started studying Spanish in school. So we use the indicative to make a statement that's supposedly a statement of fact. Doesn't mean it's really a statement of fact to everybody, but what is a statement of fact to the person who is speaking or the character that's speaking, etc., etc. So a few verb tenses that you know, unos tiempos verbales que sabes, that have to do with the indicative are el presente, del indicativo, so that's the regular present tense that you've been using since 6th grade, el pretérito, el imperfecto, y el futuro. You've also spent a little bit of time, especially in Spanish 2, with the informal commands, and hopefully some in Spanish 3, they're still doing the formal and plurals a bit, with el imperativo, or imperative, which has to do with commands. You should know at this point in time, or at least have an idea as to how to form informal, formal, and plural commands. Today we're going to be working with el subjuntivo, or the subjunctive. And we use the subjunctive to talk about what a person wants someone else to do. The rules for when we actually use the subjunctive, applying them, are something we'll deal with in a few days next week. But first we want to make sure that you have a little bit of practice forming these verbs in this very different verb mood and getting a little bit comfortable with it, okay? So let's move forward. The first thing you need to know is how to form it, and it's going to be very important for most of us, unless you can do everything in one fell swoop, that we follow these steps to the letter, especially as you're getting started. And you're not going to see that so much with AR verbs, but when we get to our example for ER and IR verbs, you will probably understand a bit better why. We're starting off at the bottom of la primera página with AR verbs. What you need to do is start with la forma yo en el presente del indicativo, so the yo form in the present indicative tense, otherwise known as the regular present tense. Quita la o, get rid of the o. Añade estas terminaciones. The endings you're going to add are es, hemos, es, and en. So once you're set with that, you want to make sure that you get this example down. I'm not going through all the steps here. I will go through them quickly out loud, just to make sure that you hear them. But also the most important thing as well is for you to have a visual example of how these should look when they're conjugated at the end. We're starting off with the verb votar, to vote. This is a regular AR verb in the present indicative or regular present tense. So we start off simply with voto, V-O-T-O, drop the O, and then we add the endings, and we end up with vote, votes, vote, votemos, votéis, voten. Now in the middle of página 2, lo siento, por favor, pausa el video y conjuga el verbo escuchar, to listen to, para practicar. Once you're ready, continue with los verbos E-R-I-R. You will notice that for los verbos E-R-I-R, the rules are quite similar, okay? The steps that you follow are quite similar. La forma yo en el presente del indicativo, quita la o, get rid of the o, añade estas terminaciones, a, as, a, amos, ais, and an. Now, one of the things that you may have noticed going through this is like, wait a sec, we're mainly using ER endings in the present for the AR verbs. And we're using AR endings in the present for the ER and IR verbs. One of the ways you may hear me or other teachers refer to this is flip the ending. So mainly for an AR verb, you're going to use the ER endings. For an ER-IR verb, you can use the AR endings. So if you happen to hear me say flip the ending, this is what we're referring to. Now, the example that I'm giving you here is proponer, or to suggest or propose. And I picked this one on purpose from your vocab list because it deals very specifically with one of those verbs that has an irregular yo form in the present indicative or regular present tense, and that's what we have to deal with, okay? Proponer, since it has the verb poner in it, does conjugate like poner in the regular present tense. So you start off with propongo, drop the O, and add the appropriate endings. So we end up with proponga, propongas, proponga, propongamos, propongais, and propongan. If you have any questions as to how to go about this, please raise your hand and call me over. Once you're ready, pausa el video, conjugate el verbo tener en el presente del subjuntivo in the middle of page 3. And once you're ready to move on with those little wonky things we need to know about, make sure you're ready to move forward. Okay. We're moving on to los verbos con cambio de raíz, and the rules here are fairly straightforward. They're very much like the rules in el presente del indicativo, the regular present tense. Verbs that are stem changes in the present, okay, and we've got some examples here that are very common for us: jugar, dormir, preferir, pedir, servir, etc. They keep their stem change in the subjunctive, with the exception of the nosotros and vosotros forms. So the exact same rules that you would follow in the regular present tense. We have here as an example the verb defender from your vocab list. Defender means to defend. And we have defienda, defiendas, defienda, defendamos, defendais, and defiendan. So in the subjunctive, just like in the present indicative, you're really dealing with the boot verb type of situation here. We're also dealing with some spelling change verbs. And you'll note that you have to write... Well, I'll go over that in a sec. All right, we're doing some spelling change verbs. And the one thing that you have to really note is just like in the preterite, verbs that end with car, gar, and zar do have spelling changes, but they stick all the way through. It's not just a yo form thing. It applies to every single conjugation. You'll note that I have 3 conjugation charts for examples there. But you may also note that on the slide, I wrote down a few additional verbs, for example, that end with car. There are a few that that are on the next slide that end with gar, a few on the following slide that end with zar. So if you want to write those down to help yourself remember, I would strongly advise you to do so in the margins. If you feel very confident that you're going to remember them without having to refer back to the notes, then you don't have to write them down, but they are here for your reference if you would like to do so. So the verbs that we have here that end with car, we have sacar, to get, tocar, to touch or to play an instrument, and marcar, which means to mark or to dial if you're dialing a phone number. The verb from your vocab list that I chose to use as an example is aplicar, to apply. Now this really has to do with like applying a concept or a principle. The verb to apply to college or to a school or to apply for a job is a completely different verb. But this one we're using really in terms of like applying a law or applying a certain idea to a situation. So you'll notice we have aplique, apliques, aplique, apliquemos, apliques, and apliquen. And that QUE stays with the ending all the way through. We next have verbs that end with gar. And so a few common ones, 2 common ones that you should already know: jugar, which is also a stem changer, to play sports or games; llegar, to arrive; and obligar, which is a new one from your vocab list that means to obligate. The one that I chose from your vocab list for this example is juzgar. You have juzgue, juzgues, juzgue, juzguemos, juzgues, and juzguen. Finally, we have some verbs that end with zar, Z-A-R. And so a few common ones here that we should hopefully know: comenzar and empezar, which both mean to begin and are both, also stem changers. So keep that in mind as well. We also have almorzar, which means to eat lunch, which is also a stem changer. Sorry, I had to take a quick sip of tea there. The one that I chose from your vocab list for your example is gozar, which means to enjoy. And you'll notice that we have that spelling change to CE all the way through. Goce, goces, goce, gocemos, goces, and gocen. To finish up, you also have cinco verbos irregulares, 5 irregular verbs that you need to make sure you get down, okay? These are verbs that are completely irregular and don't really follow the rules. For dar, where you'd be getting rid of oy, oy, from doi, you have de, des, de, demos, des, den. Note the accent on both forms of de. For star, you're also getting rid of an oy in almost every form. In fact, all the forms with the exception of the nosotros form have an accent. Este, estes, este, estemos, estes, esten. Once you're set with these, go on to the next slide. And the final ones that we have here, we have ir, to go, vaya, vayas, vaya, vayamos, vayais, vayan. Saber, to know facts or information, and in some situations it can mean to find out. Sepa, 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 sepamos, sepais, sepan. And finally, ser, to be, sea, 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 seamos, seais, sean. You'll note that all of these irregular verbs are verbs with very irregular yo forms. Mainly they have that kind of oy ending, oy, so keep that in mind. With these, you really kind of have to remember them, but when it comes to most of the other ones, you really just need to do your best to refer back to the notes as needed and apply them to the best of your ability for the time being. Go on to some of the practice activities. Gracias y hasta pronto.